But God didn't call us to
Mm-hmm.
rescue that. He called us to be,
Mm-hmm.
counselors, to be support, and to be able to non-judge in a
Mm-hmm.
non-judgmental way, to just kind of hear what they told themselves.
Mm-hmm.
There was a story about a guy real quick. He, you know, this dude, for some reason, he started, abusing his wife, and he was cheating on her. And the marriage just, they was married. The marriage just really started to kind of go
No, yeah. Mm-hmm.
downhill. And this guy, he came to counseling and talking to him and just like, well, what's going on? Well, I don't know, I'm just not this. And, I don't know, what's going on
Mm-hmm.
with her and why I'm doing these things. And so long story short, we started talking about childhood. His parents were
Mm-hmm.
married and this and that, so he grew up in a two-parent
Mm-hmm.
home and everything. But one thing happened. One thing happened. He saw his dad kiss the office secretary one time,
Mm-hmm.
and he held the
Mm-hmm.
secret.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He held it, and so it ain't got to be like a major
Mm-hmm.
thing. And so somebody listening saying, okay, was that
Yeah,
bad? It's like if we're focused on the situation, we may not see it, but what's the
that's it.
story, the narrative? Because guess what he started to say to himself? Well, mom
Must
must
have
have
done
done
something to
something
me.
wrong.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Or I got to be the one to
Mm-hmm.
keep his
Because I
secret,
want them to
or
stay
I got to
together, so now the responsibility is on me. Mm-hmm.
exactly,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And now he's seeing these things kind of come out into his
Yep.
everyday life, and it's challenging. So if we focus on the event, we might miss the
Mm-hmm.
narrative.
So get the story, then understand the event in which the story took a turn. It almost seems like that's what you break it down to me.
And,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
That root.
yep. Understand where is it actually starting to
Mm-hmm.
integrate?
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, kind of looking at that part of the brain, and from a pastoral sense, we almost can
Mm-hmm.
go there
Mm-hmm.
like that because we know that the nature of sin is
Yep.
just that. It's separation, it's
Yep.
disruption, and we know that it's the story we start to tell
That's it.
ourselves about, who we are. That's what made the prodigal son
Mm-hmm.
so amazing, because even when he was at his lowest
Mm-hmm.
point, he didn't say to himself something that would
Yeah.
keep him at his
Yep.
lowest
Yep.
point. He said something to himself that actually reminded him of
That's it. That's
restoration.
it. Yep. He literally said, "Hey, the people, the servants in my dad's house, literally get better treatment than I'm getting right now, eating with the pigs. Let me come back from a place of humility and simply go back to my father and seek redemption." Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm with you.
Exactly.
I'm with you. So it almost seems like, hey, we understand the story in all parts that they can give us. Then we start to understand either one of the spaces. One of my classes put it as the preferred story, or where the story started to take a turn, like where
Hmm.
did the root hit. And then the third step is more, hey, do we start understanding how they can find redemption in the story? Is that what you're thinking? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We start, I mean, and that's it.
Yep,
The
the
remedy,
remedy. Mm-hmm.
simple. What happened? What were the results? And what's the
Mm-hmm.
remedy? You start understanding the remedy
Yep.
to it. We've tried to remedy our own
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
situations alone in many ways. How have you been trying to remedy this? Would be
Yeah.
my question.
Yeah.
And chances are, your efforts have
Yep.
come up short,
Yep.
uh, and
Yeah.
that's okay,
That's
because this is where we recognize our
that's it. That's
limitations.
it.
You know,
No.
in my own struggle, man, I tried hard for years. I've had to go through
Mm-hmm.
12 steps and alcoholism, and battle with
Mm-hmm.
nicotine addictions, and yeah, I try to do these things on my own. I even tried to do them with
Yeah.
12 steps. In fact, when I finally stepped away from 12 steps, and I ain't
Nah,
knocking
I know
12
you're
steps,
not.
y'all,
12 steps. We don't want no
but when
smoke. We
I,
don't want no
I
smoke.
when I stepped
Yep.
away from them, they thought that I said, you know what, I just want to try to trust this. I've been trying to do this way,
Mm-hmm.
man centered, somewhat way. I want to trust
That's it.
Christ with this. They was like, well, if you're not connected to a building and you're not coming to this building every day, you're gonna
Mm-hmm.
relapse. And I just
Mm-hmm.
didn't believe that, because I just believe in part is, if Christ is
Mm-hmm.
the remedy to my
Mm-hmm.
brokenness, then I don't have to continue to come to
Nope.
brick and mortar,
It shouldn't be a
for that. I
continual
can.
dependent thing in order to find victory. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's right, in spirit and
Mm-hmm.
truth, and I think that applies to
Mm-hmm.
anything people that are
Mm-hmm.
dealing with. Can you find you can find healing and
Yep.
restoration, right
Yep.
where you are.
I also
So.
think too, and you spoke to it. I think when we really work alongside someone from a counseling standpoint, whether it be
Mhm.
pastoral or clinical, like there is a point where we must address as we're getting through the story that they can remember they're telling us, and maybe diving a little deeper there, getting to the root of how you would prefer the story to go, or just what happened that kind of disrupted the way that you see things,
Right.
and we get to the remedy. We have to ask the question, how are you trying to remedy this now? Because you possibly have some functional saviors in play that have led you
Hmm.
here and led you probably down a darker path because they haven't worked. Let's say they have
That's
worked,
right.
like in your scenario, but you realized, hey, I am completely dependent on whether these lights to this place turns on. What if a hurricane hits?
Exactly.
And
Right.
so it's that last step is almost that community and that disengaging. Like, how do we get to a point where we're dependent on God, dependent on the community of the church? Because if we're connected to the capital C church and not just the little c, we should be able to find
Hmm.
other churches that helps and supports us in that. But it's like, if we aren't even willing to address how we've remedied it before that point, then hey,
Right.
we're gonna find ourselves like eventually, like you're saying, relapsing because we've made functional saviors. Like, and if we're walking
Exactly.
alongside them and not even helping them realize, yo, this seems like this is gonna work. Wait, let's run something real quick. What if a
Hmm.
hurricane hits and that building is closed on your worst day? Like, what do? And if they can't tell us,
Right.
even if it's a good thing, if they can't tell us, oh well, I'm good at home, like I got some resources to connect at home, I'll be okay. Then it's like, hey, let me connect you with something you can utilize because it's not limited to a building. Um, but
Exactly.
I think you really hit on a point I ain't even think about is like, what are the remedies that you think you got in play that you think are working and working through?
Yeah.
Are these actually working? But
Right. That's a good point,
mm-hmm,
man. And just knowing too, that and I think we had this
mm-hmm,
conversation before. A study was done, and um, probably 80 something percent of pastors said that they were able to help members who were
mm-hmm,
dealing with
mm-hmm,
trauma, in their church. But then when they assess how many actually had
mm-hmm.
training, in areas, that percentage dropped
Yeah.
significantly. Um, Sometimes you gotta know the
Yeah,
limitations,
man.
and you gotta know where, because like I said, trauma is just is very
Mm-hmm,
complex. You can have someone from molestation to military
mm-hmm,
combat trauma to um, a hurricane survivor or school shooting, or even something that you see an uptick in now is like human sex
yep.
trafficking. You
Even
know,
down to
someone
anxiety.
from.
Like, we don't know all
Yeah.
the forms of anxiety on the pastoral care side to be able to address, like, how do we help you? Is this a chemical deal now that we don't know, or is this really like addressing past issues? Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think what I think could help, just even from a pastoral care point, is removing barriers. Like, I don't have to
Mm-hmm.
know everything, but what I do know is that if the nature of trauma is disruption, right, and like the nature of sin is isolation
Yep.
and separation, I need to be a barrier mover.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what barriers are getting in the way of you being in
Mm-hmm.
community?
Mm-hmm.
And the one of the key roles of a pastoral counselor is to
Mm-hmm.
understand those barriers and to remove those barriers. Like you said, if we're closed, something happens, that
Yep.
becomes a barrier. For this person staying plugged
Yep.
into
Yep.
community. If something's triggering this person or they feel unsafe,
Yep.
that's a barrier. Then I need to kind of keep removing
Mm-hmm.
those barriers. It reminds me of when Jesus
Uh-huh.
was in the house, and he was the person. I think it was a
Yep.
paralytic, was
Yep.
lowered.
Took the whole roof off.
You know, that's right. Take the
Mm-hmm.
roof off
Mm-hmm.
if you got to.
Yeah.
Because you come to understand something
Mm-hmm.
about a person, it's my job to make sure that I keep you in front of keep
That's
you in
it.
front of Christ. Not keep
Yeah.
you in front of me, not try to keep you in front
Yep.
of a therapist, not keep
Yep.
you in a building, but how do I keep this person in front of in
It,
front of
yeah,
community?
because even I was doing some not heavy research, but just some low level research in one of my courses, and it was saying literally like 70% of folks that are struggling, 70 to 80% of folks who are struggling with mental health are going to be more likely to go to like a religious leader than a actual therapist in the beginning. And so I
Yeah,
think that being something that is known in also because it was 75, that's like one in every four. But if that's something, if that is
right,
known, then it's like, hey, when they come to us, having not only the patience or the grace, but also building the time to be able to walk alongside them well. But also, and that was more of our last question, is having enough humility to know when it's time to transition something over to someone that's clinically trained in order to support them
right,
because you want to see them well. And I appreciate it because we got more
exactly,
folks that are clinically trained that also are believers, right? And so you got a little
right,
bit of attention in the back end of it to where you know they're going to lead them in the right direction, you know?
absolutely. And that's also, and that's another area
Yep.
of removing barriers, right? And I think one of the telltale signs that this may be, you know, in the interim beyond the scope of pastoral
Mm-hmm.
care and counseling is that when there's just significant
Yep.
cognitive
Yep.
impairments,
Mm-hmm.
and that happens, when there's
Mm-hmm.
schizophrenia, like when there's
Mm-hmm.
psychosis, or when there's mood bipolar disorders, when
Mm-hmm.
you see you know, obvious cognitive impairments, yeah, that's beyond the scope and something. And I have to, remove this barrier, try to assist this person in removing this
Mm-hmm.
particular barrier, to where they can actually have a mindset to
Mm-hmm.
where they can
Mm-hmm.
hear, and they can be more attentive to, pastoral care and be, more comfortably
Yep.
involved in community. And yeah, and that's when we know it's time. But it's never that we're
Mm-hmm.
passing them on. It's just that I'm removing a barrier so that they can be
Yep.
more functional and more invested in
That's it. Because
community.
I
So
think you spoke on it right on the tip there. That even when we have transitioned them to someone clinically trained, if we genuinely care for them, there should be a desire
right,
to follow up because that's going to be just as detrimental than not following up and assuming they're good. All right. Mm-hmm.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, because they
That's
still
it.
want to be connected. They want to stay grounded
That's it.
in their faith and kind of getting past that relationship where that's what they
Mm-hmm.
do. That's out of my hands. It's like no. And pastors got scared about this, man, because
Yep.
lawsuits started to happen. Really, people started to get sued because pastors would
Mm-hmm.
say certain things, and that person would say, "Hey, for example, I think the one lawsuit that I think happened here in Atlanta was, you know, stop
Oh
taking your
no.
medication." And I don't think the pastor's
Yeah.
intentions were for them to
Literally.
like having mental health
Yeah.
issues to stop. This person did it and end up,
Oh
attempting
man.
suicide, and of
First
course
thing they brought
the
after.
parents went after
Yep.
that. And so that's what makes them very
Mm-hmm.
nervous when that happens. And that's why I say, yeah, when there's cognitive impairments, yeah, like, you know, you can pull somebody
Mm-hmm.
else into that, a community, or build relationships, start
Mm-hmm.
establishing relationships. And two, it could be
Yeah.
witness opportunities. It could create opportunities when we start connecting with some of our local,
That's
mental health
it, man.
professionals.
I think,
You know,
and we're landing the plane, so we're good. I think the other thing that's forgotten sometimes is us as pastoral leaders must be sure that as we're walking alongside people, we need to make the investment to not take on their burdens and even seek counseling services if we feel like we're starting to. Right? We're not their savior.
that's right.
We are just the vessel being used by the savior to support them. But it's easy, especially a person who's a empath like me, to be like, oh man, I really just want them to do well. And every time they're failing, like it's like I'm failing. And it's like, no, they
Right.
they have to make the choice. And I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing too is like we have to be sure we're guarding our heart as they are moving past their trauma and letting letting it remain their trauma, not ours, if that makes sense. But
Oh yeah, exactly. I agree
yeah,
with you 100%. And it remind and then the
yep.
last story, it just reminds me of Jonah, who was more focused on what God was doing with the people that he was calling them to versus what God was trying to do with him. And Jonah experienced like depression to the point of suicide because he was like so invested in what he didn't want to happen for these people, that he started to just kind of get so not losing,
Yep.
my position basically. And to your point, don't lose your position. Know that I'm instrument. Know that I'm vessel for God to actually work through me. I don't have to define what this person is going through. I
That's
have
it.
to understand it, and I have to remove barriers. Don't be like, don't go in a well to have to do this. Just remove the barriers so that the person can have the access to
If,
what they
if
need to
they in the
have
well,
access
throw
to,
them the rope.
and they
Don't jump in the well with them.
don't jump in there.
Yeah,
Just remove it, man,
that's
so
it.
that they can find healing. And I believe it, Rashad. I buy into a whole percent, man. Everybody that comes into my office, man, whether they're saved, whether they're not saved, and I've had a chance to
That's
see
what I'm
people
talking
come to
about.
know Jesus
Mm-hmm.
through counseling because we explore every answer until they can't find anymore. And and I just believe it's more than behavioral change. It's more than emotional change.
That's it.
It's heart change ultimately. That's what's at the center of pastoral care and counseling. It's heart change. So
Ooh. My brother bringing it today. I already knew when we did this. Me and him be
that's
on here
it.
a clean hour, but I gotta let him get back to work. Ooh.
Just
I
all for you,
appreciate
Shotty
you,
Shot,
big
all for you.
bro. But D'Anthony, thank you for the time. Also, if anyone wants to look further and they're in the Atlanta area and they want to look into your practice, can you drop them just a few ways they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Our website is interlinkcounseling.net, interlinked counseling.net. Also, feel free to just hit us up. The number is 770-285-6049. Yeah, we love to talk to you,
Hey,
love to
and
support.
so I'm gonna get his info and also put in our show notes. But as you guys know, our main goal with the Real God for Real People podcast is really to talk about theology and how a God that we love and serve desires to intervene in our current issues and help us to serve the community around us. So, with that being said, man, I appreciate you jumping on with me, big bro. And you guys will know where to find them and check out next week's pod. And hope to see you soon. Mhm.
Most definitely.
So, as we stated before, if you have been blessed from what you've heard in this podcast or any of these podcast episodes, what we need from you is to like, share, follow, and subscribe. Once again, like, share, follow, and subscribe. If you do those 3 to 4 things, hey, you'll be able to help us get the word out about what the Lord's been showing us through just living life and studying His word. And then 2, you can also help us to get to a point where we can get the word out to more people. Man, I love you guys. Remember, you can also follow us on Preacher Man S. And the title will be Preacher Man S on Instagram. You can follow us there. And you can also find our podcast on most major music platforms or podcast platforms like iHeartRadio, Spotify, or Apple Music. Y'all have a blessed one, and I can't wait to jump back into this next week. Talk to you soon.